Ah, the heartbreak of rejection. The sting of watching the child you nurtured, fed, and held close, now walking away, indifferent to the years you sacrificed. What a tragedy, they say. What a terrible fate, they whisper. But is it? Let's pause for a moment and look deeper. You see, rejection is not a punishment. It is a door swinging open. A door we are too afraid to walk through because we are still clutching at something that was never ours to begin with. Rejection, a word that sends a chill down the spine, a word that carries the weight of sorrow, of abandonment, of something gone wrong. And yet, I ask you, what if rejection is not the curse we imagine it to be? What if, instead of shackles, it is an open gate? The pain of being turned away by your own child in old age is sharp, no doubt. It pierces because it strikes at the core of who we believe we are. I was their provider, their protector, their foundation. How could they leave me behind? The ego recoils at such a thought because it has built an identity around being needed. But here is where we must pause and ask, was that ever truly the case? Were we ever meant to be the eternal center of someone else's world? Life has never promised permanence. The tree that shelters the young sapling does not lament when the sapling grows tall and stretches toward the sky, no longer needing its shade. The river does not demand that the fish remain in its waters forever. Yet we humans, with our grand expectations, cling so tightly to relationships that we refuse to see their natural flow. We call it love, but often it is simply attachment in disguise, and attachment breeds suffering. Rejection, then, is not a loss. It is a forced liberation, a tearing away of illusions we have wrapped ourselves in for too long. It is an invitation to see life as it truly is, rather than how we wish it to be. Because here's the uncomfortable truth. The rejection was always coming, whether in the form of physical distance, emotional detachment, or simply the unspoken understanding that the paths of two souls must diverge. The separation was inevitable. What we resist is not the rejection itself, but the truth it reveals, that we were never in control to begin with. Consider this. If a child clings to their parent all their life, we call it unnatural. We say they must grow, they must explore, they must build something of their own. And yet, when they finally do, when they carve out a space where we are no longer central, we call it betrayal. Do you see the contradiction? We raise them to be independent, yet we suffer when they become so. We teach them to walk, yet we grieve when they walk away. The real pain is not in their absence, but in our refusal to accept that absence. We sit with the echoes of old conversations, the ghosts of childhood laughter, and we say, it should not be this way. But who decides how life should be? Not you, not me. Life unfolds as it must, not as we wish it to. And so rejection becomes our greatest teacher. It strips away the illusion that love is ownership, that care is a transaction, that devotion must be rewarded with unwavering loyalty. It forces us to sit with ourselves, not as parents, not as providers, but simply as beings. It is an invitation to find peace within, rather than seeking it in another. Liberation does not always arrive gently. Sometimes it comes disguised as loss. Sometimes it feels like the breaking of something sacred, but in truth nothing is breaking, only shifting. And if we allow ourselves to see it, to truly see it, we will understand that rejection was never an end, but a beginning. We enter this world empty-handed, and yet from the moment we arrive, we begin to cling. We grasp at warmth, at comfort, at familiarity. We attach ourselves to people, to identities, to stories that make us feel secure. And for a while, it all seems to work. We convince ourselves that we belong to others and they belong to us, that love means possession, that relationships are meant to last, that the bonds we forge will hold strong against time itself. But then something happens. A child grows up and no longer looks back. A friend drifts away. A partner leaves. A loved one is lost. And suddenly, the thing we held so tightly to is no longer there, and we suffer. We suffer because we had made it ours. We suffer because we believe that if we just loved hard enough, cared deeply enough, then loss would never touch us. But it does. You see, suffering does not arise from rejection, abandonment, or even loneliness. It arises from our resistance to these things, from our belief that life must conform to our expectations, that people must behave in accordance with our desires, that love must look a certain way to be real. We suffer because we do not want to accept that everything is impermanent. Attachment, then, is nothing more than an illusion, a trick of the mind that convinces us we can hold on to something in a world where nothing stays the same. Look at the river. Does it cling to the water that passes through it? Does it demand that each drop remain within its banks forever? No. The river flows, endlessly changing, yet never ceasing to be itself. But we, in our stubbornness, fight against the current. We want the child to stay a child, the lover to always remain near, the body to never age, and so we suffer, not because life is cruel, but because we refuse to let it be what it is. It is a difficult thing to accept. The mind will rebel against it, saying, "But love is attachment. How can I love and not cling? How can I care and not expect?" But true love, if you have ever tasted it, is free. It asks for nothing in return. It does not hold, it does not demand, it does not chain. It simply exists like the sun shining on all things without preference or possession. But we have been taught otherwise. We have been told that love means holding on, that devotion means obligation, that to be a good parent, a good partner, a good friend, we must bind ourselves to others with invisible strings, tying them so tightly that they can never leave. And when they do leave, because they must, we feel betrayed, as if something sacred has been broken. But what was broken was not love. It was only our illusion of control. Look at the trees in autumn. They do not cry when the leaves fall. They do not grasp at the branches, begging them to stay. They let go, because they understand what we refuse to see, that life is movement, and attachment is the only thing that makes change feel like suffering. So when you feel abandoned, when you feel the sting of rejection, ask yourself, was it the loss that hurt, or was it your belief that it should not have happened? Was it the absence itself, or your refusal to accept that absence? The pain is not in the event. The pain is in the attachment. Everything in existence moves in cycles. The sun rises, the sun sets. The tides come in, the tides go out. The seasons shift from spring to summer, from autumn to winter, and back again. And yet, when it comes to our own lives, we resist these natural rhythms. We want permanence where there is only change. We want to hold on where life is asking us to let go. For most of our years, we believe we are moving forward in a straight line, as if life was something to be conquered, a path leading toward some final achievement of stability. But this is a misunderstanding. Life does not move in a straight line. It turns, it loops, it circles back on itself. It is not a staircase leading ever upward, but a great ocean wave, rising and falling, never in the same place twice. And yet, when we reach the part of the cycle where things fade, where people move on, where we are no longer at the center of the story, we suffer. We suffer because we thought we could escape the ebb and flow of life. We suffer because we thought that the love we gave, the sacrifices we made, the roles we played, would keep us fixed in a particular place forever. But life does not allow for such stagnation. Life is movement. You were once a child, small and dependent, looking to others for guidance. Then you became the caregiver, the teacher, the provider. You raised a child of your own, watched them stumble, helped them stand, and now you find yourself in a new stage, one where the child no longer looks to you in the same way. The roles have shifted again, and yet we fight it. We tell ourselves, no, this is wrong. They should still need me. They should still turn to me. But who told you that any role was meant to last forever? Who told you that one stage of life was superior to another?